Now, without any further delay, let's begin today's Business Call to Action webinar, Women's Economic Empowerment, Navigating Enablers and Constraints. I would like to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Carmen Lopez-Clavero. Carmen, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I want to warm welcome everybody to our webinar. As our host has mentioned, it's Women's Economic Empowerment, Navigating Enablers and Constraints, the second webinar of our Women's Economic Empowerment and Inclusive Business from Opportunities to Implementation series. My name is Carmen Lopez-Clavero, and I'm a program specialist in the private sector and economic development at the Swedish Development Cooperation Agency, Sida. This is the second of our 3 webinars, and next week, Tuesday, February 13th, looking for more specifically at how to measure inclusive business impact around women's economic empowerment. We encourage you to register for the last webinar via the link at the BCtA website. But today, we're focusing on enablers and constraints. BCtA is starting this year with this webinar series to highlight the continuing need to focus on women's economic empowerment and how inclusive businesses can contribute to the solutions. Women are critical to the global economy, but remain excluded in many cases. Since 2008, BCtA has been working very closely with the private sector in developing countries to ensure all segments of society, including women, are able to participate and benefit from the economy. Amongst our over 200 members, we have inclusive businesses that have been championing the empowerment of women at the base of the economic pyramid. We invited some of these companies to this webinar series to share their experience and knowledge. Studies show that businesses that actively promote gender equality and women's empowerment within their core business model enhance the economic benefits to their company, while also reducing gender inequalities in the communities where the business operates. This can create and reinforce a positive cycle of economic benefits to both a company and a community. Last Tuesday, our first webinar, moderated by Paula Pelaez, head of BCtA, together with Aditi Mohapatra from BSR, Anna Fals from UN Women, and Kathy Lindqvist from AfriPass, explored key questions on the business case for the private sector to actively engage women as consumers, producers, suppliers, distributors of goods and services, or employees, and the role for business to promote and support women economic empowerment. The recording is also available on the BCtA website under the News and Events tab. So today's agenda is looking at different aspects and from different perspectives that we will be looking into. Some of our presenters include Georgia Taylor, Technical Director at WISE Development. WISE is an accomplished group of specialists who support international agencies, governments, and NGOs to achieve progress in gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. She has authored a number of key research on women's economic empowerment and worked very closely with the private sector in developing countries. Also joining me is Arianna Rossi from the Better Work Initiative, as a partnership between the UN's International Labour Organization and the International Finance Corporation. Better Work brings diverse groups together, governments, global brands, factory owners, and unions and workers to improve working conditions in the garment industry and make the sector more competitive. Arianna is a Research and Policy Officer with Better Work Global, where she leads the Research and Impact team. And finally, we have the pleasure of having 2 BCtA members today. Nicole Voillat, Group Sustainability Director at Bata Brands. Nicole is a sustainability expert with more than 17 years of experience advising, supporting, and catalyzing change within major corporations and nonprofit organizations. Bata Brands is a family-owned global footwear and fashion accessory manufacturer and retailer based in Switzerland. It is the largest shoemaker company in the world by volume, selling 1 million shoes every day. Bata Bangladesh, the local company of the family-owned global footwear and accessories manufacturer and retailer Bata Shoe Organization, has joined BCtA with a commitment to train and employ 5,000 low-income rural women as independent sales representatives. And Mashook Chowdhury, Deputy Manager of Sustainability at the DBL Group, a garment manufacturing company from Bangladesh. Mashook is leading the sustainability work at the DBL Group, preparing the sustainability reports of the group following the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, guidelines. DBL Group has joined BCtA with a pledging to provide 24,450 of its employees with access to affordably priced basic household food and health items through its fair price shops. This webinar will discuss the underlying structural barriers to women's economic empowerment. It will attempt to respond to the following questions. How can a company utilize all its potential to create impact? People, investments, brand, customers, purchasing power, and partnerships? What are some of the adverse social norms preventing women from entering the labor force? What are the discriminatory laws and gaps in legal protection? What are some of the limitations in accessing financial and property assets, and what can we do about it? As I mentioned in my introduction, I work for the Swedish Development Cooperation Agency. And for us, it is a very important topic, women's economic empowerment and women's empowerment overall. The recent discourse on women empowerment and women's economic empowerment more often than not limits that to providing women with only access to resources such as loans, sewing machines, livelihoods, but that does not empower women. This narrow definition ignores that women do not suffer only because they don't have resources. Women are part of a system of societal structures, social norms that fundamentally disfavor them. Without eliminating those structural gender inequalities, no advances on women's empowerment will be sustainable. It is for this reason that for Sida, we defined it in a much broader way, and we defined women's economic empowerment as a process which increases women's real power over economic decisions that influence their lives and priorities in society. Women's economic empowerment can be achieved through equal access to and control over critical economic resources and opportunities, and the elimination of structural gender inequalities in the labor market, including a better sharing of unpaid care work. At Sida, there are a number of key areas that we focus on that we feel are important for women's economic empowerment and to achieve that. In that sense, we feel that it's important to remove the barriers to female entrepreneurship and promote inclusive financial services and trade policies, increase gender equality in terms of access to and control over land and property rights. And also it is important for us to ensure equal access to decent and productive work for both women and men, but also equal sharing of unpaid care work between men and women. For us, it's also important at Sida to increase women's access to quality post-primary education and increase education and skills development, and by that increase the number of children enrolled in early childhood education. For us, it's important to promote gender-sensitive social protection systems and recognize and remunerate women in their critical role as agricultural producers. It is this broader gender equality agenda that we feel it's important in order to achieve women's economic empowerment, but also sustainable development. Achieving women's economic empowerment, it is very important, and the control over economic resources and ensuring that they can use them to exert increased control over other areas of their lives. And for that, this global policy priority in light of its potential contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. But without more further ado, I want to hand over to my guest, Georgia, for her presentation.
Thanks very much, Carmen. That was great to hear about Sida's policy, and I'm going to just talk a little bit about, explore a bit more in detail of some of the constraints that women find, and the underlying structure as well. So first of all, just to go back to the definition, which Carmen's already mentioned, but to recognize that the definition of women's economic empowerment needs to include an understanding of how women can act within markets and succeed and advance economically and gain fair and equal access to economic institutions. So there's the sort of whole income earning side of the definition. And then there's the other side of the definition, which has to do with power and agency and control over resources and decision making. And I find that really useful to have those two together, because sometimes programs might work just on one and not on the other, or they will get confused between them. But in fact, they work very comprehensively together. And just to also understand that women will be living within an environment and will be working within different environments. So we tend to look at, say, women in the workplace. We might look just at the workplace, but what you will also be having to think about is what's happening to women in the workplace, and also what's happening to women outside of the workplace, maybe on the way to work, but also how they're interacting with their communities, and thinking about how that interacts as well with their overall economic empowerment. So I'll just look a little bit at that and think about some of the barriers that women face in the workplace or in enterprise. So in terms of agency, we've just got a little definition here about the personal social power to make choices and act and impact on the world. Now, we recognize that this is quite often is contrary to social norms and structure. So you have an inherent tension there going on when women's agency gets changed. And it's really important to understand how any activity will work with that structure and within the social norms. So just looking at agency, some of the barriers that women find is, lack of low levels of education, limited knowledge and skills, or lack of confidence or ability to speak out. There's also, women have specific roles within most cultures, which often mean they're doing an awful lot more unpaid care and household work than men are. So they have a real burden on their time. And there's a real tension about beliefs of roles within the workplace and within the household. And just to mention at this point that quite often when we're working on women's economic empowerment, there's an expectation that women will do everything because they are expected to spend their money on educating their children, and they're expected to keep going with unpaid care and household work, whilst at the same time taking a full role in the workplace. And I think that tension is quite well understood, but it's not necessarily taken into account in programs. And then the low value and poor quality of jobs. Quite often women find themselves in jobs where it's an informal employment. So even in the formal sector, they might not have contracts. They wouldn't necessarily have access to social protection. And informal work is the majority of women's work. In Africa, it's around 80% in many countries of the workforce, the female workforce, are informal workers. And they tend to have more informal employment than men do. So they're unprotected in the workplace, and they don't get access to things like health insurance and social protection. There's also women have a limited access to assets. If they do have access to land, it might be low quality land. They have poor access to ICT hardware, for example. And then also there's the wider limited access to services. So in some countries it's really different from other countries, but in many of the low-income countries where we work, there are really limited access of women to health service, basic health services and education. But in relation to their economic empowerment also, this means limited access to financial services, ICT services and business development services. And there's a lack of investment in public services. So you might find patchwork of services available, maybe in urban areas more than in rural areas, and sometimes delivered through private sector that could be unregulated and low quality. So this limits women's capacity to work, and particularly the burden of unpaid care and high fertility rates. And there's also the issue of sexual and physical harassment, which is a really big issue at the moment in the news. This isn't just in the workplace, but also on the way to work, and sometimes limits women from even leaving the house. And in fact, in many countries, there are social norms around working outside of the home. So whilst you might have a business within the home, you wouldn't work outside of the home. And so you can see that that tension between agency and the structure and social norms, it's there amongst a range of different issues. And then there's the underlying constraints, which are to do with public policy and budgeting. There might be a bias against paying within the budget and implementing budgets for public services that will benefit women, and also implementation to things like social protection and health insurance. There's also the high level of corruption will affect the delivery of services and women's access to justice on things like land rights and access to assets. And just to note that there's, in terms of the macroeconomic policy and the balance between informal and formal, there's a real need for countries to start thinking more about how informal workers are not benefiting from economic development and growth, and also to start counting how much women and men who are working in unpaid care and voluntary work as well, how much that is, the contribution is to the economy. And I just looked up some figures, and it does often amount to between 20 and 60% of GDP if you were to put a value to unpaid care work. So that recognition of the importance of that role really needs to be developed further. And just to finish off by talking very quickly now, because I'm running out of time, about the kinds of work that companies are doing in supporting women's economic empowerment. So in terms of supply chain, there's a range of different examples now, and you'll hear some later on, but they're working directly with small micro enterprises, but also with home workers and with women farmers. Which is a different kind of relationship. But then there's also informal and formal employees, and it might be formalizing the employment contracts, might be working on voice within the employment contract, and within working with unions or in formal worker associations. And there's also really important work around human resources within the workplace, making sure that there's access to support for harassment in the workplace, and also when any threats to human rights take place. And some companies, in contexts where there is no access to health or education, they might even be providing skills and education, basic literacy, but also access to health insurance, which makes a huge difference to women's ability to participate in the workplace. And just going back to the economic advancement and linking with some of these other barriers that women have, is that more and more we're seeing that companies are working in a holistic way and looking at both the income but also the issues around power and agency, both within the workplace and within supply chains. I'll leave it there and hand over to the next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgia. I would like to give the floor now to Arianna.
Hello, hi, thank you, Carmen. Well, I think what I'm going to say is going to flow very seamlessly and build very much on what Georgia just talked about. So Better Work is a program, a partnership program of the ILO and the IFC. So we are not a company, but we work very closely with companies. This is our mission statement. We mobilize global brands, governments, factory owners, and workers to improve working conditions, drive competitiveness, and create a more equitable, more prosperous world for everyone. It's a very ambitious mission statement, as you can see, and we do so by working in the global garment and footwear industry. So the issues that were raised by Georgia, and also the issues that I imagine the other panelists will talk about, are very, very much prominent in an industry such as the garment industry, which is a very female-dominated industry, very labor-intensive industry, that holds a huge potential in terms of women's economic empowerment, because it employs women that very often are entering the formal labor force for the first time, and therefore earning an income for the first time. But it also, as I think we all know from even from reading the news, it does hold also some threats and some risks to all kinds of workers, but especially for women workers, because of vulnerable conditions of employment, precarious conditions of employment often, and just violations of basic labor and human rights. So our job is really trying to improve in a collective way working conditions, showing that this is not just the right thing to do, but also a smart decision when it comes to business. And this is particularly relevant when it comes to women's economic empowerment. So just to give you a very brief overview of our coverage, and I apologize if the slide is a little bit wonky, but we are working with more than 60 brands in the global garment industry across 7 developing countries: Bangladesh, Cambodia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Jordan, Nicaragua, and Haiti. And at the moment, we reach more than 1,500 factories across these countries, employing more than 2 million workers, 80% of which on average are women. And of course, because of the work that we do at the factory level that is very applied and very much focusing on building capacity of workers, line supervisors, and also all levels of management, we have an impact on workers' families as well. I think the key message that I would like to focus on today, having this opportunity, is that we have, as I said, the garment industry has a potential to lift millions of women and men out of poverty worldwide, and can advance gender equality in a very measurable way, but it can only happen if decent and good quality jobs are available. We have very strong evidence to demonstrate that, as well as demonstrate that the approach that Better Work has, collaborating with unions and employers and global brands and governments, is a very impactful way of dealing with these issues. So we have invested in a very large impact assessment that has surveyed more than 15,000 workers and 2,000 managers. And we see that the gender pay gap in the global garment industry that we cover has been reduced by up to 17%. An issue that, as George also mentioned, is very, very relevant and very often underreported. Sexual harassment at the workplace it was a very high concern for women workers, also in Better Work factories, and was reduced by up to 18%. And we have increased women's access to prenatal care by as much as 26%. In particular, we focus, as being one of our partner institutions is the ILO, which, as many of you may know, is the UN Agency for Labor Rights and is built on the concept of social dialogue and communications and industrial relations between workers and management. We have very strong evidence that demonstrates that any improvement in working conditions is more significant when women are freely elected and fairly represented on dialogue at the workplace, such as the worker management committees that Better Work facilitates. So it's again a demonstration of the fact that women's economic empowerment and participation in economic life is not just or just shouldn't say just, but it's not an end to itself, but it's also a means to achieve much greater and huge development returns when it comes to voice and agency. We've also seen, and I think that's a very interesting and important aspect when it comes to the business-facing arguments for women's economic empowerment, that when women supervisors are trained on soft skills and on management skills, for example, through the supervisory skills training that Better Work provides, there is a 22% increase in productivity in their line. We also have evidence that a workplace free of harassment leads to higher profitability for the firm. So there is really a win-win scenario for a business case to work towards gender equality. And finally, again, this is very well documented in the literature, but we also have demonstrated evidence on this, that quality jobs for women have development spillovers, including better health for workers and their family members, and improved education for workers' children. Now, this is not to sugarcoat the situation. I mean, we all know that there are still considerable challenges to gender equality in Better Work factories, even after the intervention that the program has put in place since years, together with these partners, both at the factory and at the national level. So we still see occupational segregation, gender-based discrimination upon recruitment. The gender wage gap is still there. As I mentioned, there's definitely underreporting of sexual harassment. There's very long working hours that conflict with the burden that women usually have as primary caregivers in their families and communities. Supervisory roles continues to be mostly taken by men. There are challenges to pregnancy-related health care, and trade union representation is still hindered by sometimes the lack of empowerment that women may feel and the lack of voice that they want to express in a very male-dominated environment. So the position that we have in Better Work is that recognizing these challenges and knowing what has worked in a very measurable way allows us to mobilize our partners, from global brands to factory owners to workers and their representatives, to work in a concerted way towards change in a very practical way and in a very measurable way. I think I will stop here for now and pass to my next fellow panelist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arianna. I would like to give the floor to Mashook from DBL Group.
Thank you. So what we will be talking about the different practices that we have relating to women empowerment in DBL group. Just an overview first, and just as Georgia stated that, Arianna has stated, we are already involved with the Better Work program. And in addition, these are some of the programs that we have, particularly for women. So we have the Female Supervisor Leadership Program. That's our own program. And this particular presentation will be focusing more on this specific program. Earlier, we had with Care Bangladesh, and it was funded by the Walmart Foundation, the Women in Factories Initiative. So that's teaching the women about leadership skills, etc. And one of our another program is the Women Health Program Initiative. So that's talking about the female hygiene issues that are there. So making awareness and also facilitating them in getting the different products. So we are having highly discounted sanitary napkins available within our factory premises. So we have the training plus the products being available all in-house. Related to that comes in the sexual and reproductive health rights. That's by a local NGO, Fulke, supported by the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So in this particular case, both men and women are participating in this training. So men are knowing the different reproductive health issues and sexual health issues. So this helps in better understanding, because the more we have about knowledge, the more we learn something, the lesser conflict that becomes. Also with Care Bangladesh, we have the financial literacy program. So this is talking about the savings, expenses, etc. So women are getting to know that they should be saving a small portion maybe of their money, and this helps enough. And we have with UNICEF, the Mothers at Work program. So we're taking care of the working mothers' children as well, because so that they can attend to their babies within the work time. So we have breastfeeding corners within the factory premises, within our daycare center. They can attend the women. Also, women from the community are coming in. Those who have left their children within the community, they are coming in within different times as well. So that's 30 minutes, 1 hour extra time. That's apart from the break that they have. So this gives a psychological benefit to say that their children are being taken care of. The female supervisors in DPL, this is just a quick summary. We currently have about 10,000, over 10,000 female workers in the garments manufacturing units. So that's 49%. So we are trying to maintain the gender balance over here directly. Related to the female supervisors, currently 40 female supervisors are there. We have about 250 sewing lines, and this is the target, this is the focus point where we want to improve upon. Just the benefits before that, salaries have increased by up to as high as 107% increase after the promotion. So we're talking about the low-income workers who are being provided the trainings, the necessary trainings, technical skills, soft skills, as Arianna has mentioned. Because relating to soft skills, one of our supervisors stated that she wasn't even aware that how to talk nicely to people. So a lot of things may seem that we should be knowing this, but certain people may not have that particular knowledge. So these trainings are there. The soft skills training, the technical skills, combined together, this helps us out. So, and of course, the salaries increase as well. And an interesting study has yielded, and one internal study that we have done, it's 2.98% more efficient. These are the female supervisors who are up to 3% more efficient than the male supervisors. We've also found that the better in housekeeping, when female supervisors are there, it's better in housekeeping as well. So what we have designed is the 2020 goal, that 50% of our sewing lines will be led by female supervisors. So that is in brief about the female supervisors in DBL. If we talk about a little bit of a business aspect over there, because since the idea is that maybe we can have a different perspective, the importance of women, that is there, but if businesses are looking at the business impact, so this helps them further, motivate them further. So we have female employee turnover comparing between 2011, where we had about 6% turnover, now it's only 2%. The absenteeism rate has gone down as well. In 2011, it was as high as about 8%, but now it's only 3.6%. All these together caters to $624,000 extra production annually. So we're talking about a direct business benefit over here. Because the idea of having female supervisors is that since our sewing lines have, let's say, about 50% female, So it makes sense to have female supervisors leading their lines. And this isn't just briefly, the benefits to the business that it's coming in. So how do we counter the structural barriers? One of the issues that would be there when we started having female supervisors, that the existing people, the existing workers, they were not used to seeing a female running their lines. But this changed over time. In the workplace, we have programs to create awareness. So we're talking about issues that gender is not going to be an issue. It's more like the work that is there. So this is how we're catering to the workplace uneasiness, so to say. Going back to the society, when women are moving back to the community, the local community they live in, so how to help them, how to help the community people, how to make women socially acceptable, or rather in terms of position I'm talking about. So we are hosting community knowledge exchange programs. This is covering sexual and reproductive health issues. It's covering financial literacy issues. And we also are having community ambassadors. Within very soon, let's maybe the 10th of February, we will be having community ambassadors within the local community. The idea of these community ambassadors would be that they will be moving to the community. They will be talking about the empowerment issues. They will be talking about the sexual and reproductive rights, SRIG issues. They'll be talking about multiple things. So they are from the, so to say, the representatives of the community. So that is how we're trying to cater to the community. At the same time, if there is any problem within the community, these community ambassadors can help us identify that as well. So these community ambassadors is one of the new things that we will be venturing into very soon. And within the female workers, because we have talked with female workers, we've talked with the management, they have stated that they're a little bit uneasy, that whether I can go for it. Since I'm a worker, how can I move up in the ladder? Over here, we're explaining the increased social status. For example, that the supervisory position, within or rather, the worker's position has a limited set of roles. We have different categories, but that still remains within the worker category. But once the worker moves to a supervisory position, there's a whole lot of new chain comes in. They can become line chiefs, they can become in charge, they can even become the production managers. So the pathway opens up over there. They're not just confined within the workers anymore, they're moving up. And this is one of the things that the supervisors, the existing female supervisors, are motivating. This is how they are motivating. And that's what is helping us to achieve the target of 50% female supervisors by 2020. So we have a particular vision regarding the female workers. A vision helps us better move along with the different, I should say more focus with it. So it's to be the most attractive employer for female workers in the garments industry of Bangladesh. The reason is if we are talking about the different programs, so we are talking about the SRHR issues, we are talking about the empowerment issues that is there. So as Georgia has stated, the succeed and advance economically. So that part is being covered, the leadership issues. We're talking about handling the personal hygiene issues. We are talking even about how to save money. We're talking about, once again, how to take care of their children with the Mother Center work program. And we are also, additionally, one of the things that we did not include within the slide is that we're supporting the employees' children as well. So providing scholarship to workers who are earning less than, in Bangladesh, 25,000 per month. So we're sponsoring 2 of the children's education. So this helps them move forward. So we're talking about not just one issue, we're talking about a package of issues. So this is how we aim to fulfill this particular vision. I think I may be a little bit fast, but I would be passing on to the next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mashook. I will now give the floor to Nicole, another of our BCtA members.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Thank you, Mashook. I think it's before talking about our specific case about women's empowerment that we have at Bata, I think it's important that I just quickly talk about what is Bata's philosophy and culture since inception, which means 123 years ago. The company was the first mass producer in shoes which were affordable and of good quality. And already in the beginning of the 1900s, the company was providing housing, education to the factories and all employees, and it expanded that kind of model all around the world. And around the 20s, we had more than 11 Bata towns were created around the world, where there was a factory, there were shops, there was entertainment, and for the employees and their family. Quite unique model, which shows very clearly what was Bata's philosophy in terms of supporting the community. I just read quickly, and you have it in front of you, in a nutshell, what is Bata's philosophy. Bata's philosophy is to treat Bata shoe companies to be treated not as a source of private wealth, but as a public trust, a means of improving living standards within the community and providing customers with good value for their money. His son said the real role of business is to give a service by making and selling products that satisfy the wants and needs of society, and in doing so, to be a caring organization in partnership with community and government. And I think the company has done this pretty well along the years. As you can see, we produce mainly for the developing world, but we have also shoes for the developing world. We produce flip-flops for $1, but also a bit more expensive shoes for the Western world. We produce in our own factories. We still 23 factories. In several factories, we have, of course, several women who are also working, and we have more than 30,000 employees, and we have created out of the more than 13,500 entrepreneurs that work with us, and they were mostly former employees who we helped them to create their own business. Now, talking briefly about one of our empowerment program is the Rural Sales Program that we have in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, we have 2 factories where we produce for the local population. So we produce flip-flops, as you see them on the picture, and they are the price for the public. It's $1 each. In 2005, we partnered up with CARE in Bangladesh, and we wanted to help into an empowerment program. And we found 45 women, and we started the program by these women selling door-to-door our products and earning quite good money, because then with the time they also added all the products to their basket. And nowadays we have, from 45, we have more than 3,000 women in Bangladesh where they earn a month an average of $130, which if we consider with the garment industry, it's almost double. And we are reaching out to 375 households, covering around six SDGs with this program. We have had quite a few obstacles at the beginning, because so-called normal woman was not accepted to be able to work in a rural environment. And we had to change our business model by engaging mainly with women at the edge of society, women who were divorced or widowed, which actually the only thing they could do if they would not sell our shoes would be begging or being a prostitute. So we have worked with these women and successfully, and they can still take care of their family and at the same time earn some money in a dignified way. I think I leave it there for the moment, otherwise there will be no discussion, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Now, due to the limited time, I want to open now the floor and the lines to questions from our audience. I have already received some questions, so maybe I will start with that. But otherwise, you can, those in the audience can start submitted further questions in our Q&A box. But the first question I have from the audience is to Georgia. In your presentation, you talked about many barriers that to women's economic empowerment, such as lack of access to property, assets, and financial services, insufficient social protection. And this exists across different countries. But of course, women shouldn't be treated as a uniform group. Could you share with us some a specific example of such barriers and how they differentiate between countries? Thanks.
Yes, thanks very much. Yeah, we find that, I mean, the conditions are really different in every country, but also within countries, you have women within different conditions, and different levels of discrimination, sometimes based on ethnic and religious groups, on disability, it could be caste. And so there's different levels of discrimination and exclusion that women experience, both within the workplace, but also within their own communities. And also, just to go back to the issue of healthcare and access to health. So, for example, in Nigeria, where I've worked a lot, there's a huge difference between the north of Nigeria and the south. And this also affects access to services and poverty levels. And, for example, the mortality rate in northern Nigeria is around, or is nearly 10 times more in the northeast than in the southwest. And fertility rate as well is much higher in the north than in the south. So you have a situation where women are clearly not getting access to good health services. Now, this is improving all the time, but it adds an extra dimension of vulnerability to women. There's also differences between urban and rural in terms of access to resources and markets. And I could go on, but I'll let someone else have a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. I have a question for all of the panelists. And the question is, what is your top 3 practical and most effective enablers for WE interventions, women economic empowerment interventions? Anybody wants to take that question?
I guess I can give it a little try. One, if you're talking about the top 3, the first thing would be that empowering through the career perspective. So in this particular case, we are talking about that a worker should not be remaining within the worker position, but when we open up to the supervisory position, that shows a career path. So that is one of the top things that would be there. And the second thing would be health issues, because certain health issues for women needs to be particularly focused on. And I guess if we put in number 3, that would be education. That's one of the things, whether it be education for the particular women workers, supervisor, or whoever it may be, or we should also integrate that for the children as well. So that would be giving them the focus, okay, fine. So once they have further degrees, maybe they are more acceptable, or rather move up higher in the societal rank, to say. So these would be my answers. Thank you.
If I may, I would like to add to Mashook's points. I fully agree with the issues that he has brought up. I think in our experience in Better Work, there's 2 issues that are also very, very key to advance women's economic empowerment. And one is really addressing gender discrimination at the workplace, and in particular, I would say violence and harassment at the workplace. As these are, I mean, obviously huge hurdles for women to be active participants in the labor force and to thrive in the workplace and in an active labor market position. And secondly, related to this, is the issue of voice and representation. The fact that in the concept of empowerment, there is this idea of agency and power.
And I think in our experience, it's very hard to imagine that women workers can achieve that without having a voice in their decision making at the workplace. And therefore, we really think we place particular importance in developing capacity and strengthening capacity of women workers to speak for themselves and find effective representation at the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Nicole and Georgia want to take up some of these top 3 practical enablers? Otherwise, we can move to the next question.
Yeah, sorry, this is Georgia. I'll just go ahead just very quickly. I just wanted to add to the last comment, which is how important it is, this collective action and voice, but it's also really important to talk to women and for women to have voice so that you can understand what exactly is the reality. And
Georgia, we lost you. Georgia, are you there?
Yeah, we seem to have lost Georgia. Maybe I can move to the next question whilst Georgia gets back on the line. And the next question would be for Nicole. And we often think wrongly that the constraints for women are within the business community. The constraints on the supply side are also numerous, and the constraints women face to access these market opportunities are often far more important in time, social norms, etc. Do you think the private sector has a role to play in unlocking these constraints, and what do you think that would be?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, definitely. I think that especially, I don't know, apparel and footwear segment, especially because it's the segment that I know specifically, we have, for example, several women working in our factory, and they have been working since decades, right? But if I take, for example, the example of India, northern India, we don't have any women who want to work in our factory, and in the south we have only women working in our factories. In Zimbabwe we have mainly men, and in South Africa we have only women. So it's really different. Now, in terms of programs, let's say putting up a program, you know, that involves the community, like the one we have in Bangladesh, but we have also one in Kenya, a bit similar. I think it's really important nowadays. Companies cannot do this all by themselves, and very often they have to work together with the civil society on the ground, with NGOs on the ground, in order to help them. In the case of Bangladesh, for example, without the aid of CARE, you know, playing the logistic part of our program, it would be very difficult for us to organize lorries, you know, they bring out the flip-flop at $1 out in the rural side. So I think collaboration, partnership is now crucial for any kind of empowerment program, and women's empowerment program in this case specifically.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time for more questions. And from our side, we want to thank you very much for joining us on this webinar today. These are the kind of discussions, as you probably all agree, that reinforce the power of BCtA network to foster important connections and help us work together with business to create an inclusive and sustainable world. You will all receive a follow-up email with a link to the presentation, audio recording, and a reminder about our third and last webinar on women's economic empowerment. And the end of our webinar series, we will also publish an insight report with the key findings from the 3 webinars, which we hope will support the private sector with the women's economic empowerment endeavors. I would like to thank especially also our panelists today, Georgia, Arianna, Nicole, and Mashook, and thank you all for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Carmen. This does conclude our webinar. You may now disconnect.